Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told out of Voice Radio. So today, we're going to be looking at a new Furfrou card. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a Pokemon we talk about very often, to be perfectly honest with you. It's not a Pokemon I expect to be talking about all that much in the future, but what I can tell you for the time being is this particular Furfrou, pretty gosh darn good. And I think it could see a little bit of play. It's definitely going to be a beast at pre-releases, but I think it could see a little bit of play even before that. And thank you to the lovely Antoine Boulay, who did tweet this one at me so that we could see what it is, and he even put a translation in there as well, because he is, as you should all know by now, a lovely man. Now, one of the big downsides of Furfrou right at the beginning, it's weak to fighting. Weakness to fighting at the moment is just rubbish. We've got Buzzwole running around everywhere doing a whole bunch of damage to a whole bunch of Pokemon. And let's face it, a Buzzwole with a strong energy when hitting for weakness will do 100 damage. Furfrou's 90 HP will ensure that it goes down straight away. Instant KO by Buzzwole. That, ladies and gentlemen, not particularly good. And of course, Dialga Gx is everywhere at the moment, which means a whole bunch of people are going to be trying to counter it, and all those people will inevitably end up countering Furfrou as well. 90 HP is very low. Maybe in Expanded you've got Level Ball, and maybe Level Ball will come back one day. These things do tend to come back around. Retreat cost of 1 is good, especially given the fact that the attack you're going to be using is for 1 energy, so retreating's going to be kind of easy. And I suppose we should mention at this stage that it's a colourless Pokemon. Downside, you're not hitting anything for weakness, not since the Garchomp Wars ended. But the good news is, you can put it in any deck whatsoever. All the attacks have a colourless energy, so in that respect, it's pretty nice. Now, there's only one attack on Furfrou, but I think this is an attack that's good enough to warrant actually giving it its own video. What does it do? Well, first of all, it does 20 damage. 20 damage is fine. But it allows you to draw until you've got 5 cards in your hand. So actually, the 20 damage here, it's a bonus. It's just a nice, oh, cool, I get to do a little bit of extra damage. Really here, this is a starting Pokemon. This is a Pokemon you have there at the beginning of the game. And I can think of much, much worse Pokemon to have here. Because it's a basic Pokemon, and it attacks for 1 colourless energy. Now, it means you couldn't use something like a strong energy, but other than that, this would fit into any deck whatsoever, and it gives you a nice Pokemon to use as a starting Pokemon. And we're in a format at the moment where we're often using Tapu Lele to grab ourselves a turn 1 Bridget. Starting Pokemon are used an awful lot. I think the question of whether this is a decent starting Pokemon isn't really a particularly valid question. You're doing 20 damage, you're drawing a bunch of cards, assuming you've got your hand down small enough. This is a good starting Pokemon in terms of the attack. I think the question here is it better than what we've already got? And that's a much more interesting question, and a question I'm not quite so sure about. Now, the gold standard, really, the one that sees the most play at the moment, is Alolan Vulpix. Alolan Vulpix, for 0 energy, allows you to search for 2 Pokemon and put them into your hand. Now, you can grab yourself a Tapu Lele for next turn, or maybe if you're playing an Empoleon deck, you go and grab yourself a Prinplup. Maybe you grab an Empoleon if you've already got a rare candy in hand, etc, etc. You've got a whole bunch of options. And the thing that makes this particularly good is that if you do bridge it for an Alolan Vulpix, you can then use your energy attachment for the turn to retreat whatever you've got in the active, assuming it's got 1 retreat or less, so that you can then use Beacon, because Beacon is a 0 energy attack. Something like Furfrou's a bit more awkward. If you use your energy attachment for the turn to retreat here, you're not then also going to be able to attach an energy to Furfrou in order to use this first attack. That is actually a little bit frustrating, a little bit annoying, a little bit suboptimal, to be perfectly honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe you start with a free retreater like Tapu Koko, more on that one in a minute. Maybe you end up with a Floatstone to give you that free retreat, that would be nice. Otherwise, it's a bit awkward. But that doesn't mean to say it's not going to be used. Diancie saw quite a bit of play in early Gardevoir lists, although to be fair, that has dropped off in usage considerably, and that was a similar kind of thing. It just allowed you to search for a Pokemon and evolve up. It saw some play, it was good. So I want to go back to Empoleon. I want to use Empoleon as an example, because I'm going to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, I am loving Empoleon lately. There's going to be a video showing some of my Empoleon battles going up online in the very near future. Hopefully at some point this week, you can see my love for Empoleon grow. But let's take something like Empoleon. Alolan Vulpix is a very good card. You can search out Prinplup, you can search out Empoleon, you can get rolling. But maybe you don't actually really want the Empoleon. Maybe you've got Empoleon in your hand. Maybe the card you really want here is a rare candy. Well, you can't Alolan Vulpix for that. What you can do is play your hand down very, very low and then use Furfrou to draw in 3 or 4 cards. One thing that happens frequently is you find you play that turn 1 Bridget, and then you can use an Alolan Vulpix, but you've got no supporter for next turn, there's no Cynthia or anything sitting there, and you're in top deck mode. Now you can always just search for a Tapu Lele, but then you using a bench space, and with an Empoleon deck, you want 1 or 2 auxiliary and you want 3 or 4 Empoleon. You want to be using as few other Pokemon as possible to fill up your bench. So if you're having to use an Alolan Vulpix to search for a Tapu Lele, then that's 2 bench spots being used up that you cannot use for other Pokemon. Whereas if you use something like a Furfrou to go grab some extra cards, you're not going to be using 2 bench spots, you're only going to be using 1. Of course, there is a quite quick counter-argument for that. What about if you don't draw anything? Because it's completely random. Maybe you don't draw anything here. Just because you're drawing 3 or 4 cards doesn't guarantee that you're actually going to draw yourself a supporter. Maybe if you want to use a Tapu Lele, your opponent's using a Garbodor or a Glaceon to turn that ability off. That would put you more towards something like Furfrou. But then again, maybe if you're using Furfrou, you cannot get your hand down low enough, whereas using something like an Alolan Vulpix, that's not an issue. And the whole point of this little discussion is this. Sometimes you want to draw cards. Sometimes you want to search for specific Pokemon. That's not to say Furfrou's better than Alolan Vulpix. That is to say that they both are used under different circumstances, and Furfrou at least needs a little bit of consideration here. Now, there's plenty of other Pokemon you can use at the beginning of the game. You can use Tapu Koko with a double colourless energy to do 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. That's a valid option. But the closest thing we've got to Furfrou at the moment is actually Dialga Gx. That's got Overclock, which similarly, it's a basic Pokemon for 1 energy, but it's a coloured, not a colourless. Draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand, but it doesn't do any damage. So, it's more techable, gives up 1 prize rather than 2, draws you 1 fewer card but does extra damage. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but as far as I'm concerned, it is definitely worth playing something like Furfrou if you're using Dialga to use Overclock. Now, of course, Dialga's got Timeless GX as well, a really good GX attack that will win you some games, so you're not just playing Dialga for Overclock. And this video is a little bit circular and a little bit back and forth and a little bit this but that but this but that. And there's a very good reason for it. A lot of the time we want a starting Pokemon, especially in evolution decks like Empoleon, where you're not getting a turn 1 attack. And there are lots of different options. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Furfrou's the best Pokemon ever, but I am going to sit here and say it's another option to use in the early game. I think it is definitely something to work with, something to play around with, something to consider. I think you should have a copy or 2 of in your binder for future reference, and that makes it a free WOSSY card. But then again, maybe you disagree with me. That's alright, ladies and gentlemen. Disagreements are healthy and fun. That's why there's a comment section. Tell me what you think about this card. Tell me the kind of decks you think it could be useful in the comment section. Go nuts, but be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and so on, you can do so over at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. But by far, the most important thing as always is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.